Hello my lovelies, my name's Dolthalion and the plan for today is to make this promised second mask. If you haven't seen my last video, it's linked down below, but I've been making masks not to make sure that proper masks stay in the hands of those who need them, but as a long-term measure for those of us who live in places that are starting to open up again with masks as a requirement. When the internet started talking about making masks, there was a lot of information going around about how quickly elastic deteriorates when you sterilise it, and this is absolutely true. However, having now worn a mask, not as someone who needs to wear it constantly all day, but as someone who might, for example, go on a long walk and then want to take public transport back, or go to the shops and walk to the shops and then need to put one on for the shops, let me tell you how much easier it makes day-to-day life being able to just put it on and not have to tie it on. Now, I need to add to that, you should not be putting on masks that you've already taken off. If you take public transport to the shops, take it off to walk to the shop, and then put it back on to go in the shop, you're negating the benefit of the mask, because the point of the mask is to protect everything that's underneath, and that includes the inside of the mask. So once it's been taken off, that has been exposed, and you need to sterilise it before you wear it again. But there are plenty of everyday situations where you might want to just slip on a mask, and elastic makes this so much easier. Also, as someone with long hair, let me tell you how much easier elastic is on your hair. Or rather, not tying your hair into the ties. So one of the other things that I wanted to do with my mask, aside from making sure that they are re-wearable in a way that makes them part of my wardrobe, is to make sure that they have channels so that I can use elastic and still replace it without having to replace the entire mask. You can still use those channels with ties if you prefer, and obviously that would be less of a strain on the environment because you wouldn't be constantly throwing away elastic. But as a way to make sure that I do wear them by making them as easy as possible to wear, having a channel is the perfect compromise. There's two ways to thread these. You can either thread one long piece through the loops continuously, so that it has one loop going around to the back of your head and then one loop that you tie off at the back. Or you can do two individual loops that go behind your ears. The disadvantage of those is that they do a bit of wear and tear on your ears, but they won't get in the way of your hairstyle. So you have to decide what's going to work best for you. But anyway, the mask that I'm going to be showing you today is based on the same design as the one that Angela Clayton made, so I'll be linking her video down below for a much simpler and easy way to make this mask. I really like the fit of this mask that the dart provides, but I don't like that the dart is left exposed on the back, so that's what I wanted to change on this, and that's what I'll be showing you. So let's get on to the sewing. So I've got my pattern pieces here, one for the whole piece and the other for seam allowances and darts. The only adjustment I made on this pattern was to deepen the bottom dart because I found it was a little too pointy on the original, so I'll just link to the original and recommend that you double check the first one that you sew to see if you think more needs to be taken out or not. I spoke about fabric choices on the last video, so I'm just going to say again that I'm using 100% cotton for this and flatlining one of the pieces so that there's 3 layers of it. This pattern very quickly gets unwieldy when it's thick, so it definitely needs to be kept 2 layers of thicker cotton or 3 layers of thinner. There's no front seam, so the only thing you need to think about when cutting is getting the pattern centered, using the top and bottom points of the pattern to line it up. If you've done that, then make sure you mark that in some way so that you know that that's the front piece. I used the remaining pen marks from cutting out, but you could mark it properly on the inside or with a sticker if you'd rather. You also need to keep aside 2 rectangles of at least 5 cm by 9 cm for each mask that you're making, larger if you need to pattern match, so make sure you allow for that when cutting. The first step is to flatline your back piece by sewing it to the lining piece. You can use a larger stitch and, if you're lazy like me, a different colour, because as long as you keep close to the edge, this shouldn't be visible when you finish up. It's just to keep it in place while you work. At this point, transfer the markings for the darts and the seam allowances to both the front and the back pieces. With that done, pin the front and back pieces together as they will be when they're finished, with the fashion sides on the outside, and use the notches to help make 3 pleats, all facing down. If your pattern has horizontal stripes, don't forget you can use these to help keep them even. Then take it over to your iron and press them into place. This will be your only chance to get them pressed in while the mask is flat, so spend a little time and make sure that they're well pressed in, and do a second press without the pins because they do pull the fabric weirdly. Once that's done, separate your pieces again and sew in your darts. The seam allowance on the back flat-lined piece also needs to be folded over and sewn in place, but you can do this before pressing if you want. I just couldn't be bothered to change my thread until necessary, and while this stitching shouldn't be visible, I'd rather be safe than sorry with it. Press the darts out well, doing your best to avoid going over the pressed folds. Make sure that you press the darts from the front piece in the opposite direction to the back piece to reduce bulk when you join them together. Now it's time to pin and sew the top seam. Start at the center dart and check again that your darts are lying in opposite directions. If you really want to save time, you could also sew the bottom seam at the same time, but it's much easier to press the top seam if you do it first. Fold the seam allowance on the ends of the front to match the already sewn in place one on the back, so it gets sewn down as well. And then press and rinse and repeat for the bottom seam. This one is a bit harder to press, but because it's a fairly wide mask at this stage, it's not as bad as it could be. You'll also need to clip the bottom before turning it out. Just 2 clips into the corner of the dart work perfectly. With that done, fold the rest of the seam allowance on the top piece to match the sewn one on the bottom. Doing it this way makes sure that they meet up more precisely, which isn't strictly necessary given that we're about to cover them up, but good practice. If you want to be even more precise, you can tack them down now while they're still flat, but if not, pin them horizontally so that you can pull your pressed pleats back into place and pin them down, ready to sew them into place. Keep this seam as close to the edge as possible, especially if your seam allowance hasn't been sewn down yet, but make sure to catch all layers. Now at this point you could put ties on this mask and call it done, but as I mentioned earlier, I want to make the ties replaceable so I can use elastic. Plus, binding it just makes it look a bit tidier. So let's get back to the fabric I put aside when cutting. I'm going to make 2 strips 5 centimeters wide and zigzag or serge the edges. If I wasn't pattern matching, I'd then do a double fold hem on the top, pin that to the top of the mask, and then cut it with enough to do a second double hem on the bottom. But as this needs to be pattern matched, I'll instead pin it first, get that pattern matching right, then do the top hem, and then do the bottom hem. They need to be pinned on the front of the mask, right side to right side, because we're going to do a stitch in the ditch binding. Once both of your hems are sewn, sew your binding piece to your mask, making sure that the seam extends over the top stitching on the end of your mask from earlier. Press that, then fold it under, folding the raw edge in so that you have a clean edge. Pin this on the front side and sew it in the ditch, following your seam from earlier so that the stitches are hidden, but make sure to catch everything underneath. Everything will be a bit bulky by this point, so to prevent things from being pulled out of place, you might have to do the top and bottom separately. But once you manage that, your mask is done, ready to have its ties threaded. If you don't have a threading tool, then what I found works best over short distances like these is a safety pin. Pin it on and you can use that to pull your cord through. I also like to give it another press before I let it out in the world to reset the pleats, but once that's done, you're good to go. So that's the second mask done. I much prefer wearing this mask, it fits me better, but it is a bit more of a faff to make and it does take more material. But I do hope that if you try and make one of these, you do have fun with it and you make something that will keep you going until the recommendation is that it's safe once more to go out without them. Just remember to sterilise them in between each use and to stay sensible. A mask won't stop you from getting sick, it's there to help reduce the chance that if you're non-symptomatic that you'll pass it on to someone else. My question for you guys today is, when the restrictions are lifted where you are, completely or in part, what's the thing that you're most looking forward to doing? Personally, I'm looking forward to being able to go food shopping more regularly again, because I am not organised enough to do this shopping once a week thing. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful in any way, please think about giving me a like and subscribing if you're not already for more sewing and costume related content. A big thank you to all of my subscribers and anyone who made it through to the end of the video. Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay sensible, and I shall see you again soon. Bye!